Precision Locomotive Developments, formerly Bossman Games, is a developer about whom I don't know all that much, aside from the fact that he makes very comprehensive and advanced British steam locomotive add-ons for TS Classic. Originally, I was going to look at his depiction of the Black 5 for my first review of a BMG/PLD product, but the LMS engine has been pushed further down the video queue in favour of a more recent release, and various other things. I will get to the Black 5 eventually, but for now, our subjects are the Great Western Railway 4900 Hall and 6959 Modified Hall classes. PLD released his GWR Hall and Modified Hall pack in March 2025, and it's currently available to buy on his website for £25, or around $57.61 NZD, at full price. £25 is beyond what I'm prepared to pay for a TS Classic add-on these days, so I waited until I could get the halls on a discount. Such an opportunity came up sooner than expected, and I got the pack for 30% off during PLD's summer sale in mid-August, so I only paid £17.49, or $39.83 NZD, for my copy. As for what Cirrus, the Class 31, and Mara, the T14 are up to, your guess is as good as mine. PLD's is a very comprehensive pack, complete with all 258 members of the 4900 Hall class and all 71 members of the 6959 Modified Hall class, which first appeared in 1928 and in 1944 respectively. To say these things are a welcome improvement on the tired old RSC era model would be a massive understatement. Here's a side-by-side comparison between the RSC and PLD versions of 5930 Hannington Hall, and another one with the Riviera in the 50s and PLD versions of 7907 Hart Hall. Add an S to the start of his name and it becomes much funnier, or vulgar, depending on your sense of humour. Thinking back to 5930, otherwise known as Hannah, I recommend watching Dark DJ's video on the PLD halls for a more detailed overview of the liveries and variants included in this pack. To be honest, there's too much variation for me to fully comprehend. If my research is correct, the original RSC-era Hall model was first released in September 2009, which makes her 16 years old at the time of this video's production. On a personal note, I was lucky to see 3 of these engines in person during my UK trip. 2 were in the shed at the Didcot Railway Centre, and 1 was at Bridgnorth Station on the Severn Valley Railway. The 3 locomotives in question were 5900 Hinderton Hall, 6998 Burton Agnes Hall, and 4930 Hagley Hall. 5900 and 4930 are especially significant to me because they're 2 of the 7 locomotives whose footplates I got to stand on throughout the trip. On the livery front, this pack includes 4 variants of pre-war GWR Green, GWR Wartime Black, which doesn't have a nameplate for some reason, GWR Wartime Green, 1942 to 1945, post-war GWR Green, either with or without lining, British Railways Transitional Green, BR Transitional Black, BR Lined Black with the early emblem, and BR Lined Green, with either the early emblem or late crest. That was the livery selection for the 4900 Hall class, and it's mostly the same for the 6959 Modified Hall class, albeit without the pre-war GWR Green. Personally, I think it would have been nice to get some fictional liveries too, since I'd like to run the Hall in the same BR Experimental Green livery that's included with PLD's Castle pack, as cursed as that would look. There's also some preservation-era liveries for 10 halls and 8 modified halls, complete with AWS and TPWS equipment where applicable. I don't have a favourite or least favourite livery out of the aforementioned selection, but I can tell you what I think is the most bizarre. This crimson version of the famous 5972 Olton Hall, which is the closest that PLD could get to a full-on Hogwarts Express engine. On the subject of halls in the preservation era, and because I can't think of any other point in the video where a scene like this would be suitable, here's 4942 Maindy Hall alongside 2999 Lady of Legend. If you know, you know. There are an awful lot of features on these locomotives, too many for me to list them all in this video, so I strongly recommend reading the manual for the full overview. Historically, I've struggled with driving PLD's locomotives due to them being a lot more advanced than the likes of Caledonia Works and Victory Works engines, but that's less of an issue on the halls and modified halls because these ladies feature simple mode. It can be toggled on or off by pressing Ctrl-Shift-S, but I've found that, even in simple mode, you still have to switch to the F5 heads-up display to get an accurate reading of the reverser's position. I thought that using the normal F4 HUD injector control would be fine in simple mode, but I guess I was wrong. According to the manual, these engines have an auto-injector feature, which can be toggled on or off by pressing Ctrl-Shift-I, while the manual controls for the left-hand injectors are K and I, then L and O for the right-hand injectors. The specific keybinds for the right-hand injectors are reminding me of a certain sketch by the two Ronnies. If you know, you know. As much as I struggle to get used to the manual injector controls on PLD's engines, I usually have the auto-injector disabled anyway because I'm so accustomed to manual firing and watering after 12 years of playing TS Classic. Speaking of firing, you need to press F to pay respects and open the firebox door, before pressing and holding R to shovel coal, although the shovel is not animated. The ideal fire mass for the halls and modified halls is 450 pounds, or 82% on the Fisher-Price toolbar. I remember driving the rebuilt Patriot a few times, not just for this video's intro scenes, and I brought this engine up because she is another PLD product, and her injector controls are set up in the same way as the Great Western Halls. It's harder to remember the different keyboard commands, as someone who's used to the less advanced controls on locomotives like the LNER P1 and A1/1 classes, or anything else that's more or fully compatible with the F4 HUD. But I have found the driving experience on PLD's engines to be rewarding once you get the hang of it. For comparison, here's the footplate on 5900 Hinderton Hall in real life versus how it's modelled in Train Simulator. There's a small pipe under each side of the cab, out of which you'll see a small trickle of water depending on whether you have opened the fireman or driver's side injectors. It's such a small detail that you may not notice it most of the time, but it's still good to see developers adding this sort of thing. Speaking of interesting detail, there's even animated valve gear inside the frames, complete with dedicated cab camera views for the valve gear. I wish Caledonia Works would still do the same thing whenever they model an engine with inside valve gear. The only time I can recall them adding that sort of camera was on the Caledonian Railway 294 class. As for the sounds on the Hall and Modified Hall, these are apparently authentic recordings supplied by Steam Sounds Supreme, although I can't verify the accuracy of these sounds because none of the halls I saw in person were actually in Steam. Even with that in mind, I still think the in-game audio is decent overall, although the chuff sounds are quite rough around 25 miles per hour. Like I said earlier, there are too many features in this pack for me to list them all off in this video, but I will mention some that I consider to be especially noteworthy, besides the auto-injector. There's an auto fireman, which you can toggle on or off by pressing Ctrl-Shift-F, a working water scoop, lowered with Y and raised with Shift-Y, and even performance mode, although this is toggled by pressing Ctrl-Shift-P. Unlike the locomotives from Caledonia Works, which just have Shift-P as the toggle for performance mode. The Hall's manual also mentions varying locomotive conditions on a scale from 5 to 1, with 5 being perfect/X works, and 1 being very run down. By default, all locomotives are set to condition 5, but if you're after an even more challenging driving experience, you can change the locomotive's condition in the scenario editor by adding ;EC equals, and then any number from 5 to 1 to the locomotive's number string. One last notable feature I want to mention is the historically accurate model variations, as determined by the locomotive's number and livery combination. This feature is reminiscent of the Mesh Tool's LNWR Super D. In closing, I'm very impressed with the new GWR halls and modified halls, for the most part. TS Classic has been in dire need of new versions of these locomotives for a long time, and PLD's models absolutely blast their old RSC counterparts right out of the water where modelling, texturing, sound and features are concerned. However, the more advanced nature of PLD's locomotives, when compared to the engines from Victory Works and Caledonia Works, puts me off from driving the Halls and modified Halls on a regular basis. I would have preferred it if PLD had done separate simple and advanced versions of the Halls, same as what Mesh Tools did for the LMS Ginty, LNER J50 and other tank engines. But that's not to say that I think PLD needs to start doing that for future add-ons. As far as I'm concerned, he's entitled to make his DLC however he wants to make it. And if you do happen to like driving more advanced locomotives, then I'd say the Halls and modified Halls are well worth a try. This pack deserves an 8.5 out of 10.